Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Planted Unearthed. My name's Sam Peters and I'm one of the founding partners at Planted, the first contemporary design show aimed at reconnecting cities with nature. As part of the Planted Unearthed series, we're exploring how design, sustainability, food and nature can combine to create cleaner, greener, better looking urban spaces. We're looking in depth at how we can reconnect with nature by speaking to some of the most innovative and respected thinkers in this field. Today, we speak to a pioneer of sustainable manufacturing who 30 years ago founded Benchmark Furniture alongside Sir Terrence Conran, while pledging at the time to use no wood sourced from tropical rainforests. Few people took him seriously, but history will judge him and his business to have been light years ahead of their time. I'm talking, of course, about Sean Sutcliffe. Sean, welcome to Planted Unearthed.
Thank you for having me on, Sam. Nice to be here.
It's our absolute pleasure. Sean, I mean, how's it all been for you? How have the last few weeks and months been for you personally and for the business?
For me, it's been unbelievably hectic. I'm afraid I've completely missed out the lockdown experience that everyone seems to talk about of finding sort of peace and tranquility and rediscovering their own homes, because we've worked throughout. We haven't stopped at all. You can't have a workshop from home really when you've got a workshop the size of ours. So it's just been really hectic trying to rejuggle work, trying to deal with jobs being postponed, cancelled, delayed, new inquiry. So I have not had the sort of enlightening experience, I think, that a lot of people have had, and certainly sort of family-wise, I've seen it from the touchlines rather than lived through it.
I mean, can you say in sort of maybe literal terms how Benchmark's been affected, and perhaps have you thought about how it will continue to be affected in the sort of short, medium and longer term?
Yeah, I mean, Benchmark certainly, like every business, is massively affected. In the short term, we've been hugely affected by a lot of our workload being postponed. A lot of businesses deciding to rethink their strategies for refitting offices, new corporate headquarters. Obviously, the whole hospitality sector, which is significant for us, has gone into uber lockdown. And so business-wise, it's been quite distressing to watch our sort of painstakingly accumulated cash reserves get dwindle somewhat. But we're financially robust. We'll get through it, and where there's change, there's opportunity, and we'll take advantage of that. On the positive side, here at work, we've seen a tremendous strengthening of bonds. We've always been a really close, it sounds really cliche to say family, but it is pretty much like a family. People come and work here for a very long time. We've had people here for 25 plus years, so 30 years plus, some of them. And we're into sort of second generation staff now. So that we've always been close, but this has brought a different kind of closeness where we've actually become very mindful because of the sort of safeguarding issues and the distancing and the caring and the risks posed to the business and to families by virus spreading. People have taken a very caring approach to each other. There's been very little dissent. People have been very happy to keep working. Those that did go on furlough, were delighted to come back when we brought them back. And it's very enriching to see the team, the bond between the team getting stronger rather than looser. Yeah, so that's a real positive that's come out of it, for sure.
And in terms of the single biggest impact, you mentioned the hospitality industry, Sean. I mean, has that been the big one for you?
No, the single biggest impact for us has been the sort of corporate headquarters business.
Right.
You know, we do a lot of office furnishing, and you know, some major clients have just rethought it and just thought, actually, we're not going to bring all our teams together from all over the world and put them in one big office in London. So we're putting that on hold, and in the way that some of the very high-profile tech businesses have just said, actually, we're all going to work from home. I mean, we don't quite know how that's going to be, but for sure, we will see increased home working. We'll see much less centralization. We'll see more regional offices which people can access without all piling on public transport into central London. And, you know, maybe people are going to work 3 days from home and 2 days in their teams, whether it be centrally or in regional offices. Or, I mean, it's going to be different. I think I view that as quite a positive thing. I think that, you know, the sort of big centralized corporate headquarters were not maybe terribly good for the soul, and certainly not a lot of unnecessary traveling. I don't, however, think that everyone can work from home successfully. I think that we're social animals, particularly in the creative businesses. We absolutely need social interaction, and it's been very noticeable to me to see how the architects we work with, and we work with, you know, most of the big architects, have really struggled, not with the actual production of drawings, that can all be done from separate spaces, but the creative energy really does benefit from a collective approach and being together and sparking off each other. So I certainly don't think this is the end of collective working in workspaces, but it'll just be different.
That's really interesting. I mean, sort of moving to the reason that we wanted to specifically speak to you, Sean, in terms of the kind of the way you've integrated nature into your business from the very beginning. You know, can you just say what nature means to you and why that's kind of related to some of the things perhaps you've just been talking about? What is that relationship with benchmark and nature?
Okay, so on a personal level, nature is hugely important to me. I've always, you know, I grew up a country boy, not in England, but, you know, I've always lived in the country. I love cities. I love the excitement. I love the vibration. I love the energy of cities. But it doesn't take me many days to absolutely need to get back to nature, back to the country. I love the fact that as I look out of the window to my left here, there stands a 450 to 500-year-old oak tree, one of England's ancient oaks, that spreads its limbs right over the sort of center of the benchmark, and reminds us as woodworkers what it's all about. I'm very inspired by what nature teaches us about design. The sort of, I can't better quote it than my sort of all-time design hero, Leonardo da Vinci, who said, and I knew this well because it's on a statue that I worked on with Eduardo Paolozzi, though human genius in its various inventions and various instruments may answer the same end, it will never find a more beautiful, a more simple, or more direct answer than nature, because in her inventions, nothing is lacking and nothing superfluous. That's not an exact paraphrase, it's just, but you get the point. I really think that nature teaches us to design what's essential, what's beautiful, and leave out anything superfluous. And I think I've always sought that to be a kind of guiding principle in the design work we do as a team. And so I've been greatly encouraged by the movement over the last, 10 years, back towards a much more natural approach to design. You know, we've seen obviously the adoption of a lot more wood, that came about, I think, post the financial crash of 2008, when we saw a huge change. You know, you could sort of see the Saloni in Milan in 2008 and the Saloni in Milan 2009 was a dramatic reversal. All gone, it was all the sort of bright plastic bling, bright colors, the sort of nonsense of it, and there was a real focus on natural materials and sort of solid, dependable, traditional techniques, craftsmanship, let's call it. And I guess that's a response. When the world gets nervous, we revert to what feels very comfortable, and things that are natural feel very comfortable. And I think human instinct is really, really underrated. We allow for that whales can migrate 250,000 miles and return to the same nesting ground. We allow for the fact that swallows nest in my barns here and return year and year after traveling to Africa over winter. And we accept that instinct's there, but human instinct, we seem to have forgotten how to rely on it. And I think that we should listen a lot more to our own instinct. And I do believe that our own instinct will pretty much always lead us to look at nature and to rely on nature. Wood plays a really important part. It's a very comforting material. It's our oldest relationship. Everyone feels good about wood. We all feel positive about wood.
Can I ask you, in that case, relating obviously to wood, but the sort of formation of your business, and I mentioned it at the top of the interview, but just the fact that you've always resisted using materials from rainforests. I want to ask you a little bit about sustainability and what that really means, and kind of, we also were talking before we started the recording about a change in your family as well, in terms of the way that you kind of interact with stuff as such. But perhaps, yeah. So I've got 2 parts to that question. One, what did you see down the track that perhaps few others were seeing when you formed Benchmark? And then after that, what's changed recently about your relationship with presents?
So when I was very lucky in my early 20s to have a sort of very brief encounter with Jonathan Porritt, who was then, he was a teacher, you know, he was a teacher in a school in London, but he was very inspiring, and he simply opened my eyes to the fact that there was an issue of sustainability, that there was an issue of deforestation, that there was the possibility of we didn't call it a climate crisis in those days, but you know, that we needed to be mindful about our material use. So this was in the early 80s, and it struck very deep. And so right from the very, very beginning of my adult life, I've refused to use tropical timbers, simply because then the big issue was virgin tropical forest deforestation on a mass scale, which continues to be so. Of course, the argument has become much more sophisticated now, but we were, you know, very early. In fact, we were the first workshop to get FSC chain of custody certification. Same with PEFC and Grown in Britain. You know, we've really tried to lead with sustainability. And in the early days, you know, I faced quite a lot of misunderstanding or perhaps criticism, both from outside and from within the business. And it was only when we started winning work for notable customers, you know, the Eden Project, where we did the first fit out, the National Trust headquarters, the Woodland Trust headquarters, the Kindersley Biodiversity Centre, when it started to make business sense, then people within the business started to get it, and actually do firmly believe that we do have to rationalize our emotional response to sustainability with business. We have to make sustainable practice good for business in order to get, you know, proper adoption. And then we've continued on that path. So it's for 35, 36, 37 years now. I've been pushing that wheelbarrow up a hill. But now sort of the hill's leveled out a bit, and it seems to be being adopted very widely. The arena that really interests us now is to take the argument a little bit further into natural materials, non-toxic interiors, you know. And so we're now the first UK business furniture maker to have declare labelling, red list free, so non-toxicity and transparency of materials. We produce EPDs, environmental product declarations, on not all, but a large part of our products. And so I'm a firm believer that the movement towards not just sustainability, where that is absolutely key, but towards health and well-being in the built environment, and what we can contribute, what we as people who produce stuff can contribute in that way. So that means less stuff. It means better quality. It means stuff that's going to last a lot longer. I have a baseline rule that everything we make should be able to last 100 years. Absolutely everything. Now, whether it does, but then we have, you know, we can help that by having end-of-life return schemes. You know, things can we repair for life. So anything that breaks throughout the life of the product, however long that may be, 100 years, I hope, we will repair it. We take back schemes at the end. If people change their circumstances or businesses change, we take it back and we repurpose or reuse or even, you know, bottom line, give it to charity. So it's really part of that, you know, the circular economy of trying to give whatever resources we use the longest possible life at the greatest possible value. And that's, we're constantly trying to explore new ways of doing that. And then you allude to my family, and of course in my family we take it, we do take it very seriously, but in the greatest fun. So Christmas is a big issue, isn't it, for every family, that kind of horrible stressy rush to acquire presents and give them.
Yes.
And then, you know, after Christmas, thinking, now what do I do with all this stuff? So Lerka, my wife, this past year when we had a big family gathering of 20 plus people staying in our house, she set the rules very early on in the year to say, you're not to buy anything new. Nothing new is to be bought for presents. So you either repurpose or recycle something that you own, whether it's a book or a tool or painting. You can make things, or you can buy something old and refurbish it. And it was fantastic. It was so embraced. It was the best Christmas presents ever, because everything was done. You know, or you could grow it. So one of my children, you know, grew plants for everyone. My mum made chutneys for everyone. You know, whatever their skill was, they brought to bear, and it was just fantastic. And there was none of that sort of stuffocation feeling. There was none of that, God, this is excessive feeling. It was a really, really happy, creative, joyful way to deal with Christmas. Yeah, so if you're looking for a way, you know, as you plan Christmas 2020, please do think about buying nothing. Just recycle, make, create, grow. Don't add to the world.
I absolutely love it, Sean. I mean, that is just music to my ears, and certainly something that my family, whether they know it or not now, may be about to experience in our Christmas coming up.
All the kids in our family, they loved it. You know, the grown-ups, everybody. Nobody felt shortchanged in any sense whatsoever. It was universally joyful. Yeah.
I guess it really encourages you to think about what they like and what they love, and just, it's a much more thoughtful approach than just rushing out and buying more stuff, which we really don't need, do we?
And I hope that as people do that more and more, that you also expect less. I mean, I think that we should all expect less of material stuff. That's quite a simple rule.
Which I completely agree with, and it's great to hear it articulated in such a smart and sophisticated way. But Sean, could I ask you, as again, and part of this whole piece, I guess, for us, and trying to understand how we can kind of reconfigure things to be more sustainable, if that's a word. It was becoming sort of slightly hackneyed in a way, or almost cliched, but we're trying to wonder and explore this idea of regeneration and actually kind of pushing back against the tide in a way. And we've been really taken by this concept of rewilding. I don't know what your thoughts are, and that has been some really interesting developments during the lockdown. I mean, I love the conceptual rewilding vision. And I think that we all, probably those of us who are lucky enough to have gardens or land, or have bought into it to some extent. I think the farming community, and I live surrounded by the farming community, are deeply skeptical, because they're so ingrained that the whole purpose of farming is food production, and they don't see the possibilities. But at the same time, I love the fact that everyone's gardens are getting wilder and shaggy around the edges. I love the fact that hedgerows now proudly carry signs saying rewilding project. Before people go, oh, I wish the council had cut the verges, and now everyone's rejoicing in the fact that the council isn't cutting the verges, and we are getting more spring flowers, or no mow May. It's just let nature do its job. I've been very impressed by a few of sort of my personal friends and heroes, and amongst them I'd put Sebastian Cox with his manifesto on land use, and another friend of mine, Toby Anstruther, who has a very, very large farm in Scotland, and farms in England as well. And he has really thoughtfully re-envisaged food production on his land and land stewardship. But again, going back to my point, it's got to be good for business if it's going to be good for the land. So it has to work. I'm really enjoying it. Our garden and the field around us, gets shaggier and shaggier, and more full of nature, which I'm really enjoying. And I read Isabella Tree's book, but the book I've really enjoyed recently. Actually, I've still quite finished it. I'm just coming to the closing chapters. Is Overstory, right. The American book, which is kind of just gives such an emotive, powerful pull into the miracle of trees, the absolute miracle that are trees. And they've been here for millions, billions perhaps of years before us, but certainly many, many, many millions of years before us, and they will be here many, many million years after us, I hope. But just the miracle that is trees. So I'd highly recommend that book. That will be next on our list, and certainly be available at Planted in our bookstore for sure. Just like so many people, we're also sort of learning so much at this time, and it's a really exciting time to look at nature and re-examine our relationship with nature, I think. And through people like yourself, Sean, obviously you've been leading this charge for a long time. But if I could just wrap up the interview, Sean, because I'd love to keep talking to you for hours and hours. But it's just one sort of simple question, really, and in many ways, I think you've already answered it just through the sort of the joy that you've brought to this interview and the intellect that you've brought to this and how you're looking at things. But are you still optimistic about the future, Sean?
Yes, I'm an eternal optimist. I think that if we lose our optimism, if we lose our smile, we lose our soul. it's more challenging to be optimistic. I'm of an age where I grew up in a fantastically optimistic world. I grew up in the 60s, and it was everything about the future was bright. It is more challenging now, and raising children in these challenged times brings new demands to be optimistic. But luckily, childhood brings its own breed of optimism. You know, children just are eternally optimistic, and so let's look to them and not let our own lives be too clouded by the storm clouds that inevitably, you know, climate change, of course, is the really big long-term one, but short-term, there's COVID, and sort of viral threats could be a very big, significant long-term issue as well. I highly recommend watching the minimum amount of news. I think that, you know, we avoid watching the news. I listen to the radio, and I get some news that way, and we, you know, have the channels that we do read. But I just think too much television broadcast news is eating away at our optimism. So yeah, spend more time with children, and don't watch the news.
Well, that's a pretty good way to sign off, I think. But listen, Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well,
what an educational
Thanks.
experience. It's been terrific, and you know, certainly personally, if I've learned one thing from this, it's how to run a Christmas, and I think that's a really
highly recommended. I'm loving the view of the Nada Valley behind you. It looks absolutely spectacular.
We're very, very lucky to be in this position, and we thank our lucky stars every day. So, Sean, thank you again. It just leaves it for me now to say thank you to Sean, and to close by saying, if you've enjoyed today's edition of Planted on Earth, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel, details of which can be found on our website, www.planted-cities.co.uk. We've got more great content to come in the next few weeks, including an interview with a world-class former sports photographer who swapped the cricket fields of England for the wild spaces of the UK. We'd also like to thank our friends at L Decoration, who recently named Planted on Earth among their top 5 virtual cultural destinations for June. But for now, it's thanks again to Sean Sutcliffe, and thanks to you for watching. My name's Sam Peters, and this has been Planted on Earth.